Then I started to do brake jobs and stuff for the neighborhood. They gave me money. I was just absolutely stunned.
Or, if you don't start to learn to spell, you're going to end up being a car mechanic.
For years, fans of chasing classic cars couldn't help but notice that something had changed. Wayne Carini was still searching for rare classics and forgotten treasures, but one familiar face had quietly disappeared. Roger Barr, the blunt, no-nonsense mechanic who had become a fan favorite, was suddenly no longer part of the garage. As time passed, questions only grew louder, and the answers painted a far more complicated picture than anyone expected. Why did Roger Barr leave the show? And what really happened behind the scenes? Join us as we uncover the full story. The partnership that looked perfect from the outside. Some partnerships make so much sense that you never imagine them ending. For years, Wayne Carini and Roger Barr looked like one of those partnerships. One chased forgotten automotive treasures, while the other brought them back to life. They did that until the split that shocked fans worldwide. Now, Roger Barr has finally decided to open up about his split with Wayne Carini. But to understand why their partnership eventually fell apart, you first have to understand why it worked so well for so many years. For a long time, Roger and Wayne seemed like the perfect team. Their chemistry never felt forced or manufactured. Instead, it came from two men with completely different personalities whose strengths balanced each other. Wayne was the dreamer who could see potential in forgotten classics, while Roger was the realist who knew exactly what it would take to turn those dreams into running machines. That balance became one of the defining features of Chasing Classic Cars, which premiered on June 3, 2008 on the Velocity Channel, later renamed Motor Trend TV. Over 17 seasons and 204 episodes, the series followed Wayne Carini as he searched for rare and valuable collector cars hidden in barns, garages, and private collections across the country. After buying them, he would restore the vehicles before either adding them to his own collection or selling them for a profit. The appeal of the show was never just the cars themselves. It was the chase. Every episode captured the excitement of discovering a forgotten automotive treasure and the challenge of convincing an owner to part with something they had often kept for decades. Wayne was at the center of that adventure. Born in Portland, Connecticut in 1951, he grew up surrounded by automobiles in his father, Bob Carini's restoration shop. As a young boy, he swept floors and learned the trade long before he was old enough to work on cars himself. A ride in a Ferrari 250 SWB when he was just 9 years old sparked a lifelong passion that shaped his entire career. Under the guidance of renowned Ferrari mechanic François Sicard, Wayne mastered the art of restoring some of the world's most valuable sports cars. His reputation eventually attracted high-profile clients, including David Letterman, Ivan Lendl, and members of the DuPont family. Television producers discovered him after reading about his work in the New York Times. He never pursued fame. Instead, the cameras found him because of the reputation he had already built. But while Wayne excelled at finding extraordinary cars and imagining what they could become, someone still had to handle the difficult reality of making those restorations possible. That role belonged to Roger Barr. Born on Staten Island in 1936, Roger had already lived an extraordinary career long before television audiences met him. He raced during the 1950s, served in the United States Air Force at Bitburg Air Base in Germany, earned an FAA airframe and power plant license, and later opened a Connecticut repair shop specializing in foreign automobiles. His shop even displayed a famously blunt sign reading, "No French cars allowed," a perfect reflection of his straightforward personality. Roger's connection to Wayne stretched back decades through Wayne's father, Bob Carini. The two respected each other's craftsmanship, and Wayne had known Roger since childhood. So when chasing classic cars needed someone capable of handling the mechanical side of complex restorations, Roger was the obvious choice. Although he appeared in just over 40 episodes, Roger quickly became one of the show's most popular personalities. Fans affectionately nicknamed him the Curmudgeon because he never sugarcoated his opinions. He was blunt, highly experienced, and completely uninterested in performing for the cameras. That honesty made him stand out. His contrast with Wayne created some of the series' best moments. Wayne would excitedly unveil a newly discovered classic, convinced he had found another hidden gem. Roger would immediately point out every flaw, every expensive repair, and every mechanical headache waiting beneath the surface before quietly figuring out how to fix it anyway. That partnership became one of the show's greatest strengths. For years, it looked effortless. But behind the cameras, tensions were beginning to grow, and one injury changed the dynamics of everything they had built. The injury nobody prepared for. The beginning of the end started with a Minerva. In 2017, Roger was working at F40 Motorsports on a Minerva that Wayne and his business partner Ralph Morano had acquired. The Minerva is an extremely rare Belgian automobile, the kind of vehicle that requires the kind of deep mechanical knowledge that only someone like Roger possesses, which is presumably why he was the one working on it. While working on the car, Roger sustained an injury to his leg that subsequently developed into a serious infection. He was hospitalized in August 2017. For a man who had been active his entire life, racing in the 1950s, serving in the Air Force, running a foreign car garage for decades, and still doing hands-on mechanical work at 82 years old, the hospitalization was a confrontation with physical limits he hadn't previously had to fully acknowledge. He returned to work in November 2017, attempting to resume his role at F40 Motorsports. The infection, however, had not fully resolved. His leg continued to cause problems serious enough to require knee replacement surgery. His son began posting updates on Roger's Facebook page, keeping the fan community that had built up around his television presence informed about a situation that was getting more complicated and more expensive with each passing week. And here is where the situation crossed from medical into something that generated lasting damage to how the public perceived Wayne Carini and the operation he ran. Roger, at 82, had been working at F40 Motorsports as a part-time employee, 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, without benefits. That arrangement, legal in its structure, meant that when he was hospitalized after a workplace injury, he did not automatically qualify for workers' compensation under Connecticut law. The threshold for workers' comp eligibility excluded him based on the hours he worked. His friend Steve Cripps set up a GoFundMe campaign with language that was direct and damning in equal measure. Roger Barr did not benefit from the sales of the million-dollar exotics that moved through F40 Motorsports. He had no income from the television series despite appearing in over 40 episodes. He earned his living as an employee working part-time without benefits, and he needed help with his medical bills. The GoFundMe ultimately raised approximately $30,000 from fans, an outcome that reflected both the genuine warmth the audience felt toward Roger and the genuine shock that a man who had been central to a successful cable television show for years was in a position where a crowdfunding campaign was necessary at all. Wayne reportedly actively opposed Roger's attempt to obtain workers' compensation, a detail that emerged through Roger's son's social media posts and was circulated widely across automotive forums. Wayne's position was never publicly clarified in detail, and he has not directly addressed the workers' comp dispute in any interview. What makes that silence land harder than it might otherwise is the financial context it sits inside. Wayne Carini's net worth is estimated at $20 million, accumulated through his 3 Connecticut companies: the television show, a car care product line launched in 2017 with McKee's 37, and decades of buying and selling rare exotics for clients, with the deepest pockets in the collector car world. The GoFundMe for Roger Barr's medical bills and the $20 million net worth for Wayne Carini exist in the same story. That juxtaposition is the story, and no amount of polite platitudes in press interviews has managed to resolve it. Roger also had personal tools at F40 Motorsports, the accumulated instruments of a 50-plus year mechanical career that he needed to recover after his departure. He posted publicly that he saw no way to get them back. Whether he ever did is not confirmed in any public record, but the image of an 82-year-old man who had given years of his knowledge, his labor, and his television personality to a shop and a show, unable to recover his own tools from that shop on the way out, is the kind of detail that sticks in people's minds long after the facts have faded. The fan community, which had loved Roger for the entirety of his time on the show, turned on Wayne with a ferocity that his PR team was clearly not prepared for. Online forums that had previously been enthusiastic about chasing classic cars became venues for extended discussions about whether Wayne had treated Roger fairly, and whether the GoFundMe was an indictment of how the show compensated its supporting cast, and whether the show's warm, collegial on-screen atmosphere had ever reflected what was actually happening between these two men. So what did the departure look like from Roger's perspective, and what did he say when he finally decided to say something? The exit with no explanation. When Roger Barr's name stopped appearing in Chasing Classic Cars episode credits, no one on the show explained why. Roger himself, through his Facebook administrator, was equally quiet about the circumstances. When fans asked directly why he had left F40 Motorsports, the admin posted that there would be no comment on the subject. What filled the silence was the accumulated public record: the GoFundMe, the workers' comp dispute, the Sun's Facebook posts, the tools, and the specific sourness of a departure from a workplace, where you had sustained a workplace injury and found the institutional support non-existent. The picture assembled itself without Roger having to narrate it, and it was not a flattering picture of how F40 Motorsports had treated one of its most valuable human assets. Roger's move after F40 Motorsports was exactly what you would expect from a man who had been working on cars since before most of the people reading about him were born, and had no intention of stopping. When the Paddock Classic Cars opened in New Britain, Connecticut in 2020, owner Michael Donnelly offered Roger a position as an expert technician. Roger accepted immediately. The Paddock, a full-service restoration and service destination for the classic car community, was delighted to announce the acquisition. They released articles to automotive media about bringing someone with over 50 years of experience onto their team. Donnelly described Roger publicly as the problem solver, the man who never needed to look at a manual because all the information was already in his head. Roger's own description of his new situation was characteristically unvarnished and entirely telling in its contrast to what his final period at F40 had apparently felt like. He called the paddock heaven. He said the people smiled, they talked, they worked on very old cars. It was unbelievable. That is the description of a man describing relief. The Craftsman interview that the Paddock produced with Roger in March 2022 gave fans their first extended look at him since his departure from the show, and it confirmed what the GoFundMe and the forum discussions had suggested. Roger Barr was in good spirits, still sharp, still deeply engaged with the work, and apparently quite comfortable not being on television anymore. The fan response was enormous. The paddock's social media presence grew substantially on the back of Roger's following, because the audience that had watched him on Chasing Classic Cars had never stopped being interested in what he was doing. But the interview also left something unaddressed: the direct question of what had happened between Roger and Wayne. Roger never went on record with a single accusatory statement about Wayne Carini. He also never said anything warm or positive about him in the years following the departure. In the space between those two things, the audience drew its own conclusions, and those conclusions have not been kind to Wayne. What did Wayne actually say about Roger in the years after the split? And why did it not land the way he probably hoped it would? The polite platitudes made everything worse. When interviewers asked Wayne Carini about Roger Barr in the years following the departure, his answers were consistent. He called Roger's contributions invaluable. He spoke warmly about their long history. He referenced the fact that the show had originally been a documentary for which nobody received compensation, implying that the financial arrangements around the television component were more complicated than they might appear from the outside. What he did not do, in any public interview, was address the allegations that had circulated, the workers' comp dispute, the opposition to Roger receiving compensation for a workplace injury, the GoFundMe, the tools. That silence was interpreted by the fan community as confirmation of the worst version of the story. When someone with a $20 million net worth says nothing specific about why their elderly employee went to GoFundMe for medical bills after a workplace injury, the silence tends to be read as its own kind of statement. One fan, quoted in coverage of the situation, captured the dominant audience reaction with precision. He never explained why Roger was never paid or why he was fired. The automotive fan community on Reddit, on forums, and on social media reached a verdict that Wayne's PR strategy did nothing to contest. Roger had given the show something it could not manufacture, and the return he received for that contribution did not match its value. That verdict has not changed, and it is the permanent context in which everything Wayne says about Roger now lives. So what does the relationship actually look like in 2026? And where do both men stand after everything that happened? The Hollywood legend who never learned to slow down. In 2026, Roger Barr is approximately 89, which puts him in remarkable territory for a man who is, by most accounts, still showing up to a classic car shop and still doing what he has always done. He lives in New England with his wife, Sally. He works at the Paddock Classic Cars in New Britain, Connecticut, in a capacity that owner Michael Donnelly has described as mentorship. As much as active wrenching, Roger is the accumulated institutional knowledge of the place, the person newer mechanics go to when something stumps them, the one whose brain contains 50-plus years of direct experience with the specific cars that pass through the shop's bays. His Facebook fan group remains active. He has maintained his no-comment position on the specifics of the F40 Motorsports departure, and the admin who manages his social presence has not deviated from that position across the years since the split. The closest Roger has come to public statement is the description of the paddock as heaven, the smiling people, the talking, the very old cars, the unbelievable atmosphere. That description, offered in the context of a man who had spent his final period at F40 managing a workplace injury without institutional support, carries the weight it carries without Roger having to add anything to it. The knee replacements were successful. He had both knees done, the GoFundMe covered a significant portion of the surgical costs, and the recovery, while not easy for a man in his 80s, produced results that allowed him to return to limited active work. The update posted on his Facebook page in November 2021 said simply that staying home had been boring, so Roger went back to work today. That sentence is the most Roger Barr sentence imaginable. At 85, after a hospitalization, a workplace injury dispute, a GoFundMe, a split from the show, and the shop that had defined the most visible years of his career, he went back to work because staying home was boring. His legacy in the automotive world is, at this point, entirely secure and entirely independent of chasing classic cars. The show made him famous to a general cable television audience, but the reputation he carries in the actual classic car community, the one built across 50-plus years of working on vehicles that most mechanics would refuse to touch, of knowing things that aren't written down anywhere anymore because the people who knew them died, that reputation exists on its own foundation that no GoFundMe and no network departure can destabilize. The Paddock's own article about Roger described his boss's assessment with a specificity that is worth sitting with. Roger never needs to look at the manual of whatever automobile they are working on. All the information is embedded in his head. That is a sentence about a craftsman whose knowledge has been absorbed into him so thoroughly over so many decades that it no longer requires external reference. That is the thing that F40 Motorsports lost when Roger walked out. And that is the thing the Paddock gained. In the end, Roger Barr never gave fans the dramatic public confrontation many expected. He never publicly attacked Wayne Carini, never wrote a tell-all, and never tried to rewrite history. Instead, he quietly went back to doing what he had always loved: fixing cars. Whether fans believe he was treated fairly is a question that remains fiercely debated. But one thing is undeniable: Roger's reputation as one of the finest craftsmen in the classic car world survived long after the cameras stopped rolling. Do you think Roger Barr got the recognition and support he deserved after everything he contributed to chasing classic cars? Or was his impact ultimately overlooked? And if you were in Wayne Carini's position, do you think you would have handled Roger's departure any differently? And why? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.